video, we are going to talk about gears, but before rigging them, we're going to learn how to actually create gears first. So let's delete the default cube, and if you go to add and then preferences, and you open up your add-on, and you go scroll down a little bit, you'll find one that is called add mesh extra object. So go ahead and put a check on there and then close that. So now if you press Shift A and go under mesh, you have a few extra mesh here. And in there you have gear. So we're going to click on gear here. So we have a nice gear here. So if you open up that little panel, we've got a few settings that we can change. So let's go ahead and make a few gears. So this one is nice. So let's actually just close the gap there by selecting both row of edge by pressing Alt and then selecting a row and then Shift Alt and selecting the other row. Then from there, go to edge and then bridge edge loop. And from there, if you want that hole to be smaller, just press S for scale and then Shift Z so it does not scale in the Z, but in the Y and X instead. So we can bring that smaller. Let's go to the top and let's quickly toss it out of the way because we're going to make at least another one. So let's go add another gear. And from there, we're going to double the size. So we're going to make it 2 meters and we're also going to double the teeth. And from there, let's grab that edge and then Shift Alt and grab that edge or that loop and then bridge the edge loop. And from there, scale and then Shift Z and bring that down about there. And then let's put that there. And let's make a tiny one. So we're going to go Shift A and then gear. Then let's make 1.5 with 60. There you go. So enter edit mode and Shift select the row of edge, Shift Alt select. Sometimes you need to reorient yourself a little bit and then bridge the edge loops. Top out of there. Now let's make a quick little arrangement. So I'm going to use this as the start. I'm going to bring that one here. I'm going to quickly align it there. Going to make another one, so Shift D, and I'm going to quickly bring it, let's say there. And then let's align this one a little bit as well. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to freeze those transforms so there's no actual rotation like the ones we just included there. So let's go to Object, Apply, Rotation. All right. So now from there, we could rig this with bones and use the exact same techniques because we're going to use constraint. Now you could use drivers and same with bones again, but drivers will take longer and actually do the exact same thing. All right, so here, if you go to constraint and copy rotation and grab the picker, we can copy the rotation of that little gear. So if you switch this to add and we need the Z only. So now if I go here and I rotate the Z, it copies the rotation on the same direction. So we need to invert it. So now what you do is you click on invert. But now it's actually working, but it's going too fast. Now remember, this gear is twice the size of that one. So what you can do is to simply turn down the influence to 0.5. So you can do this. Now it works. So now with this one, can add another copy rotation, but copy the rotation of the previous one. And this one, simply invert the Z. All right, so now if I rotate this, it rotates the other two. And now this one, which is the bigger one, is the same thing. It's the exact same principle. So if I copy this one, invert it, and then use half, if I rotate this, it actually now works. Okay. So what if you would want to have some drive that way? Well, you can still do it the exact same way. First, let's toss that out of the way real quick, like that. So it's still going to work from here, as you can see. And let's add another gear. So we're going to go to add mesh, then gear, another gear. And let's actually make it 1 with 12, right? Just like that. And then from there, you see that we have conical angle here. If you set that to 45, you'll have a 45-degree angle of a conical type wheel. Right? So now if you tab into edit mode and go to the top view by pressing 7 on the numpad, if you press Alt and select that row of edge, you can scale it down a little bit and do the same thing with the bottom. Right? So scale it down until it's about the same size, and then Shift Alt click that row of edge and then bridge the edge loops. So now let's actually bring this on that. So if I select this and go Shift S and go cursor to selected, I can then grab this and then Shift S and go selection to cursor, and it's going to bring it at the center. And then from there, I can grab it and move it up, right? So now I can have this one copy the rotation of that one. So let's actually do that. So copy the rotation of that one, set it to add. So now if I rotate this, the z-axis, it all follows, right? So now I can go ahead and duplicate this. So Shift D, then do a rotation 90 degree. And we're going to drive that in there a little bit, right? And we're going to give it a little bit of rotation so it actually sort of sink in the teeth there, as you can see. Perhaps try to position it a tidbit better. Something like this. All right. And now all we got to do is invert, and we need to copy this one. We need to invert it, but this time we'll need to make sure it's in local space so it follows this one. All right. As you can see. And there you go. So now you can continue doing the same thing. You could add extra wheels there, make a big one, it's the same principle through and through, right? But this is only using the Z, all right? So you could make sure to lock the others here so you don't accidentally rotate the wrong axis or move it about by locking it, right? So this is how you make gear. It's very similar to when you would actually use a single mesh and use bones, or non-single mesh with bones. Just like in this example right here, if you open 17 simple animation gears.blend from the support file, you'll have this armature here that has all the bones showing. And if you go take a look at these bones, they do have a rotation constraint in the y-axis. Now, the issue that I have with bones and using rotation constraints, unlike with objects, is at some point when you rotate them, they'll sort of pop, as you just saw right now. Okay? So in order to avoid that, there's a different techniques that we actually use for bones. And we're actually going to view that much later in the course on a much more complex example.